A Fox Business alert. Fisker Automotive and the Department of Energy now admitting 169 million taxpayer dollars was spent developing the Karma. This is a luxury electric car that is being built in Finland, though both still insist not a dime of the federal loan is being spent overseas. To make matters even worse, the company is 2 years behind on manufacturing its electric cars, and we loan these guys over $500 million. My voice cracks when I say it. We are joined now by our panel. We have Francis Newton, Gary B. Smith, and Megan Carberry. Gary B., are you worried about this money ever being repaid at all?
Absolutely. You know, you made some great points with the judge. You know, what's the government's track record of ever seeing a return? What's our track record as taxpayers of ever seeing a return? You know, David, you talked about this car. It's a $97,000 car for the ultra rich, if you will, that gets 32 miles a gallon. Basically, we gave them $500 million, as you pointed out, and yet we're creating jobs in Finland. I guess the biggest overriding question I have is, why are we again in programs like this to begin with? We're terrible at picking winners. And even if we're great at picking winners, that's not the government's job.
We're in the programs.
Who was that? Megan, go ahead.
We're in the programs because government is trying to invest in society and stimulate the economy. Now, it's a little bit bizarre that these jobs are being made in Finland. The government does plenty of things to further the country. They invested in companies like Blackwater to further our military purposes under George Bush, and very few people complained about that on the conservative front.
Well, I think a lot of people complain about that all over. But Francis, the question is, how successful has the government been at stimulating the economy with these projects?
Well, the government is horrendously unsuccessful because they spend a lot of time using public spending that does not have a return on investment. The problem is that I like the idea that they are supporting entrepreneurs. I like the idea that they're building up the manufacturing base and that they're creating jobs. This is not going to happen overnight. Furthermore, we have to remember that Fisker did use a lot of its funding to do a deal with General Motors and buy up some of their old plants and try and get them going again. We absolutely have to do that. We have lost our manufacturing base. However, the turnaround, we cannot expect that to bring us out of a recession because the turnaround is very, very risky. I think Fisker might end up being an okay deal. However, we have a conflict of interest here because on the one hand, we're giving government handouts like we're just printing money on trees. But the thing is that if we invest in these entrepreneurial companies, which is important to keep America technologically competitive, there are years and years and years before we can, depend on an ROI. I do hope Fisker gets a product.
And Gary, I just wonder about the government as an investor. I mean, we have seen clearly that the people that receive the money don't spend it as wisely, as carefully as they do private sector money. When you have private investors, you correct me if I'm wrong, but they are breathing down your neck every moment to make sure their money's not wasted. Not so with the government, according to the cylinder loans.
Exactly, Dave. This is a company that is now over budget, has underdelivered, is behind the deadline. Not to mention that companies like Aptera, Eco Motors, Think were also companies that are developing electric cars. They got no money and no explanation why they didn't get the money. Was it helpful to have Al Gore on the board of this company to get the money? Is this really crony capitalism? Boy, it sure smells like it, and that's certainly not the government's business to be in.
And Megan, that is another big problem, is that you have a lot of government hangers-on who are trying to get a piece of the action whenever you have government investment going. We've seen that all over the place.
To the victor belongs the spoils since the early days of this country. Everybody knows that exists.
Hold on a second. The victor, let me just repeat that.
That's
Megan,
the rationale?
let me just repeat that. To the victor belongs the spoils. The spoils, by the way, happen to be taxpayer dollars. You're saying that's okay?
I said that's been a part of the history of this country since its inception. People fight against it all the time. It's definitely not fair by any stretch of the imagination, but everybody does it. And what needs to happen here is that as the election, it's not like there's no accountability here. There's an election coming up next year, and people, especially people who are interested in mobilizing environmental voters who want to see positive investments in energy markets.
That is the point.
I'd rather support entrepreneurs. That there is an election coming up. This was not properly monitored, but I would rather see us invest in entrepreneurs. If we're going to hand out money, we can't expect them to quit doing that tomorrow. Come on. If we're going to hand out money, I'd rather see them support manufacturing, support entrepreneurship, support technology, than just hand it to a welfare system or hand it to something else.
But the problem, Francis, is the government, in order to hand out money, has to, by definition, unless they have an unlimited pot, and Granted, maybe they think they do. They have to pick who gets A and who doesn't get A. And like I said, there were 4 other companies competing for this pot of gold that didn't get the money. And it appears so far.
They're not great
hold
at
on,
it.
hold on,
I
hold on.
agree.
Hey, job of
Megan,
picking the winner.
one question to Megan. Who do you
Go
think
for
is
it.
a better overseer of investments, the government or private sector?
You know, what matters is being a good leader who understands how to move a project forward. I'm not going to split it. I'm sure there's some great government officials and some great private people who can do a good job. What matters is that someone does a good job because the country needs to move forward.
All right, but all things being equal, you say there's no difference between government investment and private sector investment. Quickly.
They've
No, because
killed the
they're invested
private
in
sector.
partisanship or trying to, you know, get a profit or get ahead. What matters
Megan,
is
you
people
may
who do
be
a good
shocked,
job in
but I don't
business.
agree with you on this one. Gang, thank you. We'll hear more of the panel coming up. A holiday guaranteed. Listen to this. Walmart, to put a little something extra in your stocking, if prices on